Welcome to the Transform Sales Podcast, where forward-thinking business leaders come to share their experiences and ideas, learn from each other, and amplify their results together. Welcome to another episode of the Sales Software Series Review. I am today with Stacy from Pointerpro. Stacy, how you doing today?
Hi, I'm doing great. How are you, Eddie?
Doing great. It's a great episode that we have for people in the audience that may be working as consultants. So, without further ado, Stacy, why don't you tell us a little bit about Pointerpro and how it can help consultants scale their practice?
Sure, no problem. So with Pointerpro, our goal is to help consultants to scale their business by creating assessments and automating the PDF report output that comes from that assessment. So we see that consultants today have trouble to scale their business without adding to their headcount because it requires, or in order to work with more clients, you need to hire more consultants because the same processes are followed in manual ways. Versus with our tool, you'll be able to create the maturity assessments that you are ask the questions to gauge the maturity of your clients digitally by building an assessment in our tool, and then also building a report with personalized feedback custom for that client that is automatically generated. So your consultants aren't spending time using multiple tools, which I know we'll talk about in a minute, Eddie, and instead can automate that report generation process.
Now, this is interesting, Stacy, because I got a sneak preview of your platform and I can see that it has way more uses, right? So someone in the audience, today we're going to be speaking about particularly consultants, but I've also seen how this applied to HR leaders, trainers, coaches, any type of assessment that you want to run at scale, automate, and even on the report side. So if you are in the audience curious about those things, there's probably another listing that you can check. But today we're going to be focusing on consultants. And you mentioned something important, which is a maturity assessment. A lot of times when it comes to consulting, you run first a diagnosis before you go ahead and start doing your intervention, your practice, providing the advice of what needs to be changed. You have to run a diagnosis. And that diagnosis, a lot of times, is what you mentioned as a maturity assessment. And so tell me a little bit more about these maturity assessments and
Sure.
The consultants that are working with you today. What were they using in the past to run these assessments, these diagnoses that can be very time consuming?
Yeah. Well, we find that, of course, every consultant has their area of expertise. They have all of that information up there in their head, and they need to, deliver their expertise to the client. And they do so in many ways. I mean, they need to, as you say, diagnose where that client is at today. And oftentimes we see that the consultants are using things like, spreadsheets, Excel or Google Sheets. They're using Google Forms. They're using a very simple survey tool to gather information from the client, or they're having interviews with the client, but they're writing down their notes and then sort of transforming it later on. And with all these other input tools as well. Based on the answers to questions that are asked, or maybe the client is giving more quantitative feedback about where they're at today. Well, then those inputs need to be translated, maybe calculations need to be run, maybe scores need to be given by the consultant. And then they're using Word, PowerPoint, whatever other tools to build some sort of report that they then deliver back to the client. But then by that time, they've had to send out one format collect information in one format, process that data that is collected, whether it be qualitative or quantitative, and then manually produce some sort of output that then is sent back to the client.
Right. Now that takes us to the next question, which is, hey, what is the challenge in doing it that way? And great that you mentioned this, because I've seen that when it comes to being a consultant, you don't make money by doing the diagnosis. You make money by what happens after the diagnosis is made. But a lot of time is spent there, a lot of effort spent there copy pasting the information. As you said, could be pen and paper, old school, Could be a Word document that I start to fill in as I'm speaking with my clients, or sometimes I've even seen people these days to start to use note takers. But there's a trick with those. Yes, they can automate part of the note taking if they're doing a very good transcript, but a lot of times when they summarize, they create such a, let's say, high level summary that you're missing some of the details. So there's always a challenge with those methodologies. Tell us a little bit more about that, Stacy.
Well, I would say overall, the biggest challenge is just the time that it takes to do the entire process A to Z. It is very time consuming, and you're whether you're billing hourly or in other ways. I mean, if you're losing time by doing this manual report creation, that feedback giving, time is money, and you're working with less clients than you could with the same amount of people. So that's the biggest one, is that the current processes are flawed because they are just time consuming. Other than that, the feedback that you give to clients is not standardized across your consultants, because the whole methodology is not standardized, and it beyond taking time to put together reports, they may not be completely professional looking reports, and the entire process of sending a Excel sheet to the client when you could send a more branded streamlined questionnaire to them is also a problem with our customers. So they wanted to come to Pointerpro to deliver not only the reporting, but also an entire streamlined process to them.
I love that you're explaining this, Stacey, because I can definitely see that situation where if you're a solo consultant, let's say, you may be running the consistency play, even though you're not using optimal tools, you know what questions to ask. But as you grow your firm, if you have other people running these diagnoses and consultations, if they don't have a systematic way of doing it, maybe the diagnosis is not always the same. Maybe a person is missing to ask two key questions that could completely influence the rest of your diagnosis. So by streamlining it, you're capturing things that matter in a consistent way. But number two, you also mentioned and tied it back to the report. We don't want consultants. They don't get paid by running the diagnosis or doing a lot of admin work. They get paid by the advice they provide after they've run their diagnosis, they run the reports, their analysis. So kind of like Pointerpro puts them back into or gives them back time, so they spend it mostly speaking with their clients, giving advice, providing the coaching, and not just copy pasting info and doing admin work. I love that. So with that said, why don't you share the screen and show us about just a couple of features that you think consultants are really loving today when it comes to automating the diagnosis, automating these maturity assessments, or even dissipating the reports through their different clients in a very clean, professional, and organized way?
Sure. Is my screen showing now?
Let me see. Yep, it's loading up. Yep.
So what I would like to show is a quick example and then a little bit behind the hood of how it's created. So like I said, consultants in any content area are using our tool. Any experts with advice that they need to give can use assessments to automate their feedback. This example here is a cybersecurity risk assessment that first asked me for what region I'm in. And this is specifically because you can actually benchmark data across different areas, regions, industries, etc. If you have that input in your questionnaire, that way you're giving even more valuable feedback to the client, not only your expertise, but also maybe showing them how they compare to their industry. Now, we ask a series of questions here about their current situation in their cybersecurity practices. So question one is, do you use antivirus or anti-malware solutions? And we have a series of questions. Now, actually sitting behind these answer options are scores. So if I select no, I'm getting a certain score. If I say yes, but not regularly updated, I'm getting another score, regularly updated or not sure. So I can click through and give my answer options. As the respondent here, I'm not actually seeing how the scoring is going, but I am giving or I'm telling the current situation so I can be diagnosed. Now, I'm not going to click all the way to the end, but I am going to show the report that was generated, and then I will show a bit of the features of how this was built. But this report was built with our tool. And you see the report, it's prepared for Stacy. So it's giving some personalization right there on the first page. It's telling me my score, my overall score on the assessment, and my risk level. I'm a high risk based on my score of 68. And then it's giving me tailored feedback because of that score. So your organization is currently in a high risk for cybersecurity threats, which indicates, X, Y, and Z. And it's giving me personalized recommendations. What should I do because of this? You'll see on this page, we're also giving some scoring on our spider diagram of my company's risk level based on my results. And it's also comparing me to a benchmark. This can be a static benchmark, or it can be a benchmark that's calculated in real time based on all assessment data, or you could base it on industry benchmarks or regional or other
geography. Yeah.
Yes, exactly. So if I dive into the back end then to show a bit about how it was built, this is the home screen of Pointerpro when you log in. If you go to the questionnaires tab, you'll see this is where you build those actual question sets and assign the scoring and do any calculations. In this case, the cyber risk assessment was built here with the different questions. Like we saw the first question, do you use antivirus or malware solutions? Here were my answer options. And on the right-hand side, we've assigned scores directly for each answer option. So in this case, the respondent doesn't know what score they're being collected, and they don't know what sort of calculation is being done with this score. They're just answering the question. But also any logic in the questionnaire can be built, and calculations can be built based on the scores per question. So imagine, in this case, this is an assessment that's broken into 3 categories. So we're actually doing some calculations to take the average of the questions in each category. But then you go to the report builder to really build that output report. So I have that pulled up in a new tab. The report builder, this is the back end of what we saw in the report that I had shown. So it's a drag and drop interface where here is the report itself. And then on the right-hand side are the widgets that I've added to each page by dragging and dropping them into the report. So if I want to bring in a piece of text, I can drag and drop it here. I can put my text in this box here. I'll just add some text. I can, make changes to the color, highlighting, size, fonts, etc. So it's all configuration. No technical knowledge is needed to build reports with our tool. But now I've added my piece of text here, as you can see. You can make copies of it. You can drag and drop them to other places, delete, etc. Now, what makes our tool unique is you can not only add text and pull in data from the assessment. Like, for example, this is going to say the name of the respondent via this variable. But what you can also do is add logic so that different pieces of feedback appear according to conditions. So if you remember from my downloaded report, I underneath my chart here, which by the way, my chart had turned red because my score was so high in a bad way. I saw this high risk piece of text. So this is a text widget, just like we just saw. But what you can do is you can add logic, you can add rules to when that piece of text should appear. And in this case, my high risk text is going to appear if my overall result formula calculation is greater than 60 points and it's lower than or equal to 80 points. Versus, for example, the critical risk feedback is going to appear only if that overall result is greater than 80 points. That's a huge critical risk. My score is way too high. So you can do that and give feedback. You saw that additional feedback here. If you remember, I was a high risk, indicating many vulnerabilities. So this way, if you set up the report correctly, you can show numerous charts and graphs telling about the scoring. You can give static pieces of information about your organization and about general information, but then you can also completely tailor the feedback that is given to each respondent based on their answers to questions or scores. So that's what we've done here.
This is pretty interesting because it looks like I've seen some companies, some consultants that take it a notch up from the ones that are doing the pen and paper or saving the info in docs. Let's say they automated with a Google form, with a type form. But even though they automate and improve the layout of the intake form, they're not connecting this in the back end. They may not have the weight criteria or system to kind of like build a report. And they're definitely not automating a report like this that in a matter of seconds, you don't have to wait. And I kind of like personally, I don't like when I have to fill in a questionnaire, take 30 minutes to fill in, I don't know, a disc personality assessment, only to wait a day or two to get the results. I love the platforms that I'm able to finish my assessment, click, and immediately get a personalized report, get customized feedback as you're showing me
Yeah.
based on the results or the
Yeah,
answer
and
that I've
that's,
selected.
by the way, that's exactly how it works. So I did not complete the full assessment, but if I did have an option here to download my report immediately on the final screen. By the way, that is optional though. We do have some consultants who want to wait and, walk through the report together with the client. In that case, they still didn't spend all of the hours to create the report, but they are still bringing it to the client. And also something to mention that I did not yet, this can be totally white labeled. So we see some very basic design here, and some like header and footer, like banners here, but you can upload your own logos, colors, fonts, etc., to really make this look and feel like your corporate branding.
I think that's very, very important, especially for those consulting firms that want to grow or that are reaching more consultants or adding more consultants to their roster, but want to keep a consistent brand quality, brand image, brand reputation. Yeah, without compromise. I
Yes.
love these features. What other features have you seen consultants really take advantage of? You mentioned
Uh,
also the sending the reports, right? So we've seen how do you fill up a form, how we get that report, what happens, for instance, when it comes to, I don't know, sending them through email if you're doing that for a certain organization.
Sure, sure. So I've now clicked through this entire assessment. In fact, at the end, we asked for the person's name, although we do have a contact system. So if you're working with known clients, you wouldn't need to ask for this information. But if I click complete, you'll see that in this case, we just gave a sort of thank you message. We gave already some, a general score. So we said your score is 60%. By the way, you can add more detail to this final screen. You can already give them a little bit of a glimpse of their scoring or give them a variable final message as well. And in this case, we chose to add the download button to the final screen. So if I download the button here, you can add your logo again for the full white labeled effect. And then I can download the report. What you can also do though is set up emails that are automatically triggered upon the result or response submission, I should say.
Mhm.
And that can go to the client, that can go to the manager of your client, that can go back to you, or to any other stakeholders who are predefined.
Awesome.
Yeah.
I can see that, for instance, in terms of assessments or things that have to do with compliance, the manager, the CTO may want to be aware when someone in their team completed an assessment and what their score was. So having those options to distribute the information is awesome. Now, that takes me to my next question. When it comes to setting up Pointerpro, what would you say, Stacy, are the tasks, deliverables, or people involved in setting up the platform? And how long does it typically take a consultant to reach full productivity and just be powering through these forms and their clients without having to spend that much
Sure,
time on admin work?
sure. Well, I think everybody kind of falls on a sort of spectrum in terms of consultants, because many consultants don't even realize that they are doing assessments. They know that they have client interviews, of course, at the beginning of every engagement. They know that they record that information. They know that they like do different calculations with the scores and then end up delivering something back to the client, but maybe they don't call it an assessment. So these people would be at the really relatively immature phase in terms of digitizing their advice reports. Then we see some consultants have already really documented their methodology. So it's not just a free form interview every time. They have a methodology in mind. They know exactly how those responses that the client gives can then translate into the report. But maybe they're not really using any tooling yet. And then you move to the next phase of maturity where maybe they are using some tools. Maybe they do have a survey application to collect the information. Maybe they do have some Excel files that are doing some automated, like doing some calculations and producing some graphs in Excel.
Mm-hmm.
And so these people are farther and farther along and ready to start to find or to really automate the full experience with Pointerpro, because those people already have a methodology. They've already used tooling. They have an idea of how the process should work. And so with those types of consultants are the more mature ones in terms of their digitization, start with Pointerpro. The process goes quickly or more quickly, I should say.
Right.
We have we have an onboarding team. So with all new customers, it is our goal to make new users experts at Pointerpro. So we will train you on how every aspect of the tool works, from building the questionnaire to setting up the scoring, the formula calculations, and the reporting. And this onboarding is a huge accelerator for making you self-sufficient in the tool to build and edit and update questionnaires and reports over time. We then also have our support team that is always available for questions during the build phase and lifetime as a customer. But how long does it really take? It's not something, if you see this beautiful report, it's not something that you're going to build in 30 minutes or even in one day.
Mm-hmm.
It is something that typically we see a few weeks to build in the tool, depending on how much time, of course, you're allocating daily. But a month would be an average amount of time to go from starting using the tool and going live with your assessment and report.
I like it. The more mature, the more you've done your practice and repeated your exercise of diagnosing, know what to use for what report, what weights, etc., the faster you'll be able to map it out because you know the process.
Yes.
The greener you are and the more you have an idea, yes, I want to scale this, but I don't know exactly what questions I should standardize. Probably the more time you'll take to tinker. But I love that there's that option of speaking with your team, getting some advice based on what others have done. And to that, I would love to ask you, Stacy, when it comes to consultants, can you give me a few examples of industries where you've seen a lot of traction, where you've seen a lot of impact that Pointerpro has been helping some consultants in automate and scale? Are there any specific verticals, line of businesses that you would like to mention? I saw, for instance, that example of cybersecurity. I'm guessing that could be one. Are there any other industries or sub verticals where you're seeing consultants getting a lot of traction with Pointerpro?
Yeah, certainly. It's any professional services organization, really. If we're looking at verticals, yeah, technology is hot. AI is hot. How mature is your organization to use AI, cloud migration? I'm naming a lot of technical verticals here.
Tech assessments, yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah, we also see it being used, as you mentioned before, in like HR, for example. So assessments that actually aren't taken on the business level, but on the employee level, the team level. Reporting can be done not only on an individual basis, but also on a group basis to assess the management level or the leadership of teams. To give another example.
Perfect.
Yes.
Awesome. So that takes me to my last question, which is about KPIs. Tell me a little bit about, we discussed everything, right? So saving time seems like the main differentiator. But if you had to share KPIs or success metrics that your clients, your consultants have used to evaluate Pointerpro, what would you say to the people in the audience?
Yeah, I think I will resound what you just said. It's saving time in the day-to-day practices of clients. It's creating more revenue without adding to your headcount, without hiring new consultants. Excuse me. People are almost always the most expensive asset to an organization. So by being able to work with more clients, bring in more revenue by automating parts of the consulting process. That's the main benefit that we see with our clients, and just adding value to presenting yourself as a more professional organization by delivering branded and beautiful reports to those clients. That's also a huge value add.
That makes a lot of sense. I've seen, for instance, let's say real estate transactions where the form to understand whether a client has the right profile, the right budget, what locations, amenities they're looking for in a project, the company can lose all the reputation. Maybe the developer can lose the reputation if they're doing it on a tiny spreadsheet, on a Google Doc, instead of what we just saw, a branded page. It can be embedded. You can customize the code. You can customize the options, the feedback that they get based on the answers. Like, it's very hard to match that, and to build that yourself is very time consuming. It's very expensive. So there you have it. Consultants, if you in the audience are considering to digitize your practice, to automate the boring parts about being a consultant and just spend more face time with your clients while ringing that cash machine, go to the CloudTask marketplace, look for Pointerpro. There will be other listings and episodes in the future for HR leaders. As we said it, internal assessments, employee assessments, rather than business level assessments that you can take a look at, but definitely give Pointerpro a chance. Stacy, it's been amazing learning more about Pointerpro, and I hope to catch you on a future episode.
Thanks, Eddie.
Awesome. You have a great day. Bye-bye.
You too. Bye.